Continuing our look at the PragerU video, Where Do Good and Evil Come From?, Professor Peter Kreeft tells us that reason cannot be the source.
What about reasoning? While reasoning is a powerful tool to help us discover and understand morality, it cannot be the source of morality.
Let's stop here and deal with the underlying problem. Pete keeps looking for the source of good and evil in places which make absolutely no sense. How could evolution be the source of good and evil, as previously mentioned? Evolution is simply the description of a process which favors certain biological variations in the struggle for existence. How could that possibly be the source for anything like good and evil? It's just something that happens. Likewise, Pete is now looking at reason. Reason is simply a function of our mental faculties, exploited and developed by humans because it yields pragmatic insights which once again aid in our survival. And Pete is right, reason is value neutral, even when you're using reason to discover value. It's just a tool, not an end in itself, and certainly not the source of anything. The source of good and evil is simply a brain big enough to judge an action or event as either positive or negative. Positive equals good, negative equals evil or bad. But please don't miss the irony of Pete's use of reason in this video to make his point. Reason may not be the source, but it's certainly a necessity in terms of making one's case and persuading others. It may not be sufficient, but it's definitely necessary. Even when the case one is making is based on divine command theory, or because God said so, which often asks people to ignore reason, sentiment, and potentially basic human decency in favor of an imaginary being who supposedly knows better. Pete continues.
Nor can conscience alone be the source of morality. Every person has his own conscience, and some people apparently have none. Heinrich Himmler, chief of the brutal Nazi SS, successfully appealed to his henchmen's consciences to help them do the right thing in murdering and torturing millions of Jews and others. How can you say your conscience is right and Himmler's is wrong if conscience alone is the source of morality?
How can Pete say that his God-based morality is right when his God's morality led to exactly the same thing as Himmler's morality? Genocide. Pete talks in these abstract philosophical terms as though we don't have some actual God-based events to look at and evaluate. He's clearly hoping that the viewer knows nothing of the Bible or the actions of the tribal war god of Abraham. Or maybe Pete's the ignorant one, completely unaware that the Nazis wore belts with buckles which read, "God mit uns," or "God with us." Appealing to God never resolves questions of morality because just as anyone can dismiss the opinions of another person, one theist can dismiss the opinions of another person's God. Pete?
Utilitarianism is the claim that what is morally right is determined by whatever creates the greatest happiness for the greatest number. But to return to our slavery example, if 90% of the people would get great benefit from enslaving the other 10%, would that make slavery right?
The great irony of this video is that every single thing Pete says can't be the source of morality, and I agree with him on that, would or either has done a better job giving us moral principles to live by than the tribal war god of Abraham. Our evolving morality has taken us from the murder of homosexuals, Sabbath breakers, and non-virgin girls to equal rights for the LGBTQ communities, women, and minorities. Reason has led us to the principles of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to worship as one sees fit, or not at all. All things which I'm sure Pete would embrace despite his gods wanting nothing to do with any of those ideas. Utilitarianism has gotten us to think about the pragmatic values of our actions. Has such thinking failed us? Absolutely. But not quite so much as the tribal war god of Abraham. And the Pete goes on.
But since morality doesn't exist physically, there are no moral or immoral atoms or cells or genes, its cause has to be something that exists apart from the physical world. That thing must therefore be above nature or supernatural.
What in Prager's name is he talking about? Morality exists as part of human thought and observation, an entirely physical process where sentient beings judge actions and events as either positive or negative, because we are physical beings at the mercy of actions and events which cause us to experience either pleasure or suffering, good or evil. If there were no one to make such judgments, there would be no morality. To suggest that morality exists on some other unknown plane of which we have absolutely no knowledge is simply to beg the question of the question already being begged. And I know everything there is to know about begging. Take that, Pete. But please, do go on.
The very existence of morality proves the existence of something beyond nature and beyond man. Just as a design suggests a designer, moral commands suggest a moral commander. Moral laws must come from a moral lawgiver.
But Pete, you've abandoned so many of your moral lawgivers' moral laws. And you've done so based on things like reason, conscience, and probably even a bit of utilitarianism. Pete doesn't want non-virgin girls and homosexuals put to death. He doesn't want everyone forced to worship the same spirit. I'd bet you he mixes wool and linen at least 3 to 4 times a week. And is there any chance he'd actually advocate genocide? Geez, I hope not. Pete?
So the consequence of this argument is that whenever you appeal to morality, you are appealing to God, whether you know it or not. You're talking about something religious, even if you think you're an atheist.
Really, Pete? You're going to end this with a version of the no true Scotsman fallacy? There are no true atheists because we all speak of morality? Kind of pathetic. And as if that weren't enough, I just have to ask, which God, Pete? To which God are we appealing when we speak of morality? The tribal war god of Abraham, Jesus, Mormonism's Elohim, or Allah? And then how do you know which God and which morality to follow? You really solved nothing with this argument, Pete, but I'll agree the consequences of this argument are clear. You should definitely not be teaching at any university in America, or elsewhere for that matter. I'm me. Thanks for watching. Last week, my therapist asked, what's your greatest obstacle in life? I had to think, money, LA traffic, the hours it takes to make myself even barely presentable, my inability to find true and lasting love, penis envy, therapists who ask questions instead of just fixing me. But then it hit me, there is one thing standing in my way like no other. Okay, not Starbucks per se, but gourmet coffee in general. Here's why. $4 per cup equals $1 per video. For years, I've asked you folks to forego just 1 cup of gourmet coffee 1 day a month in support of this show. But how could you? You folks are addicted to the caffeine. A girlfriend of mine didn't drink coffee, but she had to have a Coke every morning or she'd get a caffeine withdrawal headache. That was a revelation. Check this out. At Target, you can get a 12-pack of 12-ounce cans of Coke for $4.99. If you need 2 cans to get through a non-coffee day, you're looking at just 83 cents per month. Better yet, 300 extra strength Excedrin is less than $20 on Amazon. That's less than 30 cents per month. I don't want you folks to suffer. Headaches suck, I know that. I'm not asking for anything grande or venti. I'm just asking you, let me be your cold brew, your cafe mocha, or more appropriately, your vanilla bean or latte for just 1 day a month. Think of me as a double shot of gourmet enlightenment, the green tea of white satire, the iced caramel macchiato of weekly anti-theist content. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for me. And if you do, if you go to Patreon right now, I'll throw in thoughts, prayers, and blessings as a reward. That's no tall deal, my friends. That really is venti and about as freshly brewed as it comes. To everyone who already knows how delicious I can be, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll see all of you again real soon.